You ever follow a blood trail through December snow, cold enough to crack your bones, only to find something that forces you to choose? Live quiet or die like a man? I never thought I would face that choice. Not until that morning in 1878, deep in the Sacramento pines when the wind cut through my coat like a cavalry saber. My name is Caleb Harrow, 39 years old, former sergeant, 3rd Cavalry Regiment, current nobody. I'd been tracking a mule deer for 2 days through those mountains. Needed the meat. Winter was closing in hard, and a man alone learns to think ahead or die stupid. My Winchester Model 1873 hung easy in my grip, 15 rounds of .44-40 cartridges loaded in the tube magazine. The lever action was smooth from years of use, the walnut stock worn to fit my hand like an old friend. My hands were calloused from 3 years of chopping wood, hauling water, talking to no one but the wind. 3 years since I came home to silence. 3 years since I found Mary and Emma cold in their bed, the fever having taken them both while I was 40 miles away chasing Apaches who did not want to be found. My wife was 32. My daughter was 6. They died holding hands, the doctor told me later. Died waiting for me to come home. I burned my blue cavalry coat that night, watched the brass buttons melt in the flames, swore I was done with war, done with the army, done with everything except survival and solitude. Then the deer tracks changed. Blood drops appeared on the white snow. Too fresh, too red, too human. Spaced about 3 feet apart, the pattern of someone stumbling, falling, forcing themselves upright again. My finger moved from the trigger guard to the trigger itself, eyes scanning the pine shadows. 20 years of soldiering taught me to trust that voice in my gut. The voice that whispers something is wrong before your mind can name it. That voice was screaming now. I followed the crimson trail for a quarter mile, moving silent as wood smoke through the trees. The blood drops grew larger, closer together. Whoever left this trail was weakening fast, life draining out with every step. Then I found her. A woman lay face down in a frozen creek, forming around her body like a crystal coffin. Apache, I knew by the deerskin dress and the moccasins on her feet. Her wrists were bound behind her back with rawhide strips that had sliced through skin to bone. Someone had beaten her face until it swelled purple and black. Every instinct told me to turn back. Keep walking. Leave her there. I had sworn off other people's wars. This was not my fight, not anymore. But then I saw something that stopped my retreat cold. Old scars circled her wrists beneath the fresh wounds, healed rope burns from months or years past. This woman had been captured before. She had escaped before. And there was more. A small knife lay in the snow 3 feet away, the blade crusted with dried blood. I checked her left boot, empty sheath sewn into the leather. She had hidden that blade. When they grabbed her, she waited for her moment, cut through her own bindings, drove that knife into at least one of her captors, and ran. She had covered 2 miles through brutal mountain terrain before her body finally surrendered. This was no helpless victim waiting to be saved. This was a fighter who had almost saved herself. Her eyes open, dark as polished obsidian, fierce as summer lightning. No fear swimming in those depths, no pleading, just one silent question burning through the pain. What are you going to do, white man? I cut the rawhide from her wrists with my skinning knife. She did not flinch.
What do you want from me?
Nothing. I'm just helping you.
Did not cry out, though the leather had bitten deep enough to expose white bone. I shrugged off my wool cavalry coat and wrapped it around her trembling shoulders. That was when I noticed the patterns stitched into her torn dress, faded by sun and wear, but unmistakable to anyone who had fought the Mescalero. The geometric designs belonged to a chief's family line. This woman was not just Apache, she was someone important. I lifted her onto my shoulder and started the 3-mile trek back to my cabin. She weighed next to nothing, all lean muscle and hollow spaces where hardship had carved away softness. Fever burned through her body hot enough that I felt it through my wool shirt. Behind us, fresh snow began falling, erasing our tracks like a whispered prayer. I did not know it then, but I had just declared war on very dangerous men. 30 miles south in a smoke-filled Lincoln saloon, A man named Cyrus Drummond wrapped fresh bandages around his left hand. The knife wound ran deep between thumb and forefinger, a clean cut that would leave an ugly scar, a permanent reminder of the Apache woman who had marked him before she fled. Drummond was 45 years old, formerly a captain in the United States Cavalry, dishonorably discharged after a court-martial 3 years prior. The man who testified against him, the sergeant whose damning words cost him his rank, his pension, his entire future, was named Caleb Harrow. Small world, the frontier. Now Drummond made his living selling information to the Army and trading in human cargo. Slaves, though no one used that word anymore. The Apache woman he had captured knew the location of the Mescalero winter camp. Chief Victorio's people were hiding somewhere in those mountains, and the Army would pay $500 for verified intelligence, plus another $200 bounty for the woman herself, delivered breathing. $700 total. A fortune. But she had escaped, gutted one of his men, and vanished into the blizzard like smoke. Drummond studied the 5 men sitting around the table. Hard men with empty eyes, professional killers who asked no questions as long as the gold flowed. The Apache knows where Victorio's band is hiding, he said, his voice flat as a frozen lake. Find her, and whoever helped her escape, kill him slow. Make it last. One of the men shifted on his chair. She's probably dead already. That storm would kill a grizzly. She's alive. Drummond flexed his wounded hand, feeling the stitches pull. I know her kind. Mescalero women are tougher than cavalry leather. They don't die easy. He pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket, a hand-drawn map showing trails through the Sacramento range, purchased from a whiskey trader who knew those mountains. The Mescalero camp is here. His finger stabbed at a red-inked canyon. 2 days east. The woman was heading that direction when we caught her the first time. She'll try again. What about whoever might have found her? Drummond's lips twisted into something that was not quite a smile. There's only one cabin in that part of the range. Belongs to a hermit who moved up there 3 years back. The not smile widened, showing tobacco-stained teeth. His name is Caleb Harrow, and I owe that son of a bitch a debt that's been collecting interest for far too long. 3 days of fever. I cleaned her wounds with rot-gut whiskey and boiled creek water, stitched the deep knife gash in her thigh with horsehair thread, bound her cracked ribs with strips torn from my only spare shirt. The cuts on her wrists needed careful work. I had sewn enough battlefield wounds to know the technique. 1/4 inch between sutures, not too tight or the flesh would die and rot. She drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes muttering in rapid Apache, sometimes crying out a word that sounded like a child's name. Tarek. She called for Tarek over and over, reaching for something only she could see. On the 4th morning, her fever broke like a river dam. I was splitting pine logs outside when I heard movement within the cabin. Grabbed my Colt single-action army and pushed through the door, hammer cocked.
Men like you used to hunt down my people.
Yes, I used to be a soldier, but I'm not that person anymore.
Barrel raised. She had pressed herself into the far corner, my wool coat still wrapped around her shoulders, a chunk of firewood raised like a war club. Her eyes were wild with fear and fury, a cornered wolf ready to fight to the death. Easy now, I said, keeping my voice low and steady. You're safe here. She did not believe me. Smart woman. Why would she? I uncocked the Colt and set it on the table, far from both of us, back toward the door with my hands visible. Food's on the shelf there, water in the bucket. I'll be outside chopping wood if you need anything. I left her alone. For 5 days straight, I entered the cabin only to feed the fire and leave provisions. Venison jerky, hard biscuits, pine needle tea for the fever. She watched me each time like a wounded animal, coiled and ready to strike or bolt. But she ate, and slowly, day by day, that wild desperation in her eyes softened into something else. Wary curiosity, reluctant assessment. On the 8th morning she spoke. What you want from me? Her English was broken but clear, each word carefully chosen. She stood with one hand braced against the log wall, her jaw tight with determination that would have impressed my old drill sergeant. Nothing, I said honestly. You were hurt. I helped. That's the whole of it. Men like you kill my people. burn our camps, steal our children. I could not argue that bitter truth. I had worn Army blue, had ridden with Carson's cavalry against Victorio's band, had witnessed things done to Apache prisoners that still poisoned my dreams. I did, I admitted. I was a soldier once, but not anymore. Why you stop? How do you explain to someone that you grew tired of being the monster? That you came home to a dead wife and daughter and realized all that righteous killing had protected nothing that mattered? Because I discovered death doesn't care which side you're on. It takes what it wants regardless. Something shifted behind her dark eyes, not trust, not yet, but recognition, the acknowledgement of a shared wound. She told me her name on the 10th day. Kaya. She told me about her son, Tarak, 4 years old, quick to laugh, afraid of thunderstorms. He was waiting for her with the band, hidden in a canyon 2 days east of here. Her husband had been shot dead by soldiers at Fort Stanton 2 winters past. She had been gathering medicine herbs for Tarak's cough when Drummond's men caught her. Then she told me the thing that changed everything. The man who took me, she said, her voice hardening to flint. Drummond. He does not want money only. He wants to use me as bait, lead soldiers to my people, kill everyone. Warriors, women, children, elders. She met my eyes without flinching. His brother died fighting my people at Tres Castillos 4 summers ago. Drummond wants revenge, wants to watch my whole band burn. I understood then. This was not merely about bounty money or military intelligence. Drummond wanted blood, wanted extinction. And Kaya was not just a captive to be sold. She was the key to a massacre. I taught her to handle the Winchester in the days that followed, how to work the lever action smooth and fast, how to lead a moving target, how to squeeze the trigger with slow, steady pressure instead of jerking it wild. She learned frighteningly quick, her hands sure and calm even when firing at makeshift targets. She taught me things in return, how to read tracks on fresh snow, how cavalry horses left different prints than Indian ponies because of their iron shoes, how to spot a hidden trail by the way branches were bent, how to move through timber without snapping twigs or startling birds. We rubbed pine resin on the horses' hooves to mask their scent. She showed me how to read the wind's direction by tossing dust, how to identify approaching riders by the way songbirds scattered from distant trees. Every skill she shared might mean the difference between living and dying. We did not speak of feelings. We prepared for war. One evening, as blue darkness settled over the mountains, Kaya sat by the fire and began to sing. A lullaby, I realized after a moment. A mother's song for a child she feared she might never hold again. Her voice cracked on the high notes. Rough with grief, she refused to let fall as tears. When the melody faded into crackling silence, I spoke without meeting her eyes. I had a daughter once, Emma. She was 6 years old when the fever stole her from me. Silence stretched between us like rawhide drying in the sun. Same sickness took my wife, Mary. Same week.
I'm scared.
I'm scared too. Only a fool wouldn't be afraid before a battle.
I was out on patrol chasing ghosts while they had slipped away. Came home to find them cold, still holding hands. Kaya shifted closer to the fire's warmth. In the dancing orange light, I could see the tears she would not permit herself to shed. We both carry ghosts, she said quietly. They ride with us as always. She reached out and touched my arm, just for a heartbeat, then withdrew. 2 wounded souls recognizing a shared grief. That was all. No embrace, no whispered promises. Just acknowledgement that neither of us was alone in our pain. It was enough. On the 12th day, I rode down to Lincoln for supplies. In the general store, I heard 2 men jawing by the potbelly stove. My blood turned to January ice. Drummond's offering $200 cash for that Apache woman. Claims she escaped from him up in the Sacramentos. He'll find her sure enough. That man carries a grudge like most folks carry a wallet. Never lets go of nothing. Heard he's riding up there personal. Got 5 guns backing his play. I abandoned my supplies on the counter and rode hard for the cabin. I smelled the smoke before I crested the last ridge. Gray wisps rising against the pale sky, climbing from the direction of home. My heart slammed against my ribs as I spurred the horse faster, pine branches whipping at my face like angry hands. The cabin appeared through the trees. One corner was burning, flames licking up the seasoned logs. Two horses stood hitched outside the door. Through the window, shadows moved, searching. Kaya was not there. I left my horse in the timber and approached on foot, Winchester steady in my hands. Two of Drummond's men were inside, tearing through my meager possessions, looking for something or someone. I fired from 40 yards out. The first shot caught the bigger man mid-chest, the .44 round punching through him and into the far wall. He was dead before his knees buckled. The second man spun toward the window, clawing for his pistol. My second shot took him through the throat. Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of spreading flames. I searched the bodies quick and found a folded paper in the dead man's vest pocket. A hand-drawn map showing mountain trails, with a canyon marked in red ink and labeled in crude letters. The location of the Mescalero camp. Drummond already possessed the information he needed. He did not require Kaya to find the band. She was just a trophy now, a bonus. Revenge for the scars she had given him, the humiliation of being bested by a woman half his size. I followed her tracks away from the burning cabin. She had spotted them coming and run, smart enough to flee rather than fight outnumbered. The trail led half a mile to a shallow cave I knew from hunting these mountains. Inside the darkness, crouched behind a boulder with my spare knife clenched in her fist, Kaya waited, ready to fight, ready to die on her feet. Her rigid shoulders relaxed a fraction when she recognized my silhouette against the cave mouth. "They have a map," I said flatly. "They know where your people are hiding." The blood drained from her face. "We have to reach them first. Warn them. Get them moving before Drummond arrives." She rose without a word, the knife disappearing into her belt. Her eyes held mine in the shadows, dark and determined. "Then we ride now, tonight." 2 days of hard travel through frozen hell. We stayed off the main trails, cutting through heavy timber and across ice-skinned streams that threatened to shatter under our horses' weight. Kaya guided us by landmarks invisible to my eyes. A lightning-scarred pine, a boulder shaped like a sleeping bear, a creek bend where the water ran red with iron. She knew every canyon, every ridge, every hidden game path through those mountains. This was her homeland, and it welcomed her home. I watched the back trail constantly, checking for pursuit. Drummond had 3 men left, perhaps more if he had recruited additional guns in Lincoln. They would be coming fast, driven by greed and hatred. We could not outrun them forever. The first night, we made cold camp in a narrow ravine. No fire.
My heart isn't anywhere else. It's here.
Then stay. We'll live like free men on this mountain.
Despite the bone-deep chill. Flames would betray our position to anyone watching from the ridges. We chewed dried venison in silence, washed it down with snowmelt that tasted of pine needles. Kaya shivered beside me in the darkness, her breath making small white clouds that vanished like departed spirits. "I am afraid," she whispered. The admission cost her something. So am I, only fools aren't scared before a fight. "If they catch me again, Drummond will make me watch while he kills my son." He promised me that, made me look into his eyes while he described it. "He won't catch you. You cannot promise such things." "I'm promising anyway." Silence settled around us like a burial shroud. Then she moved closer, not for warmth or comfort, but simply to know she was not alone in the dark. "Why do you help me, Caleb Harrow? Truly, I am Apache, your enemy." I stared up at the cold stars scattered across the black sky. "Because maybe I'm tired of having enemies. Maybe I'm tired of waking up every morning with nothing to live for except not dying. Maybe you remind me that some things are still worth fighting for." She said nothing, but her shoulder pressed against mine and neither of us pulled away. Dawn of the 3rd day. We were half a day's ride from the Mescalero camp, pushing through a narrow pass between 2 jagged ridges. Morning sun had just cleared the eastern peaks, throwing long blue shadows across the snow. 5 riders appeared ahead, blocking the trail like a gate slamming shut. Cyrus Drummond sat his black horse in the center, wearing his old cavalry coat with the captain's insignia torn away. His bandaged left hand rested on the saddle horn. Even at 40 yards, I could see the cruel anticipation in his eyes. The man with the Sharps rifle worried me most. Tall, lean, professional, a paid killer who would not miss. Caleb Harrow. Drummond's voice bounced off the canyon walls, flat and cold as the stone itself. Been looking forward to this reunion for 3 long years. I moved my horse forward, positioning myself between Kaya and the guns arrayed against us. Drummond, still making your living off human misery, I see. Some men never do find honest work. You cost me everything, Harrow. His voice tightened with old fury. My rank, my pension, my good name, all because you couldn't keep your mouth shut about a few dead savages who weren't worth the powder to shoot them. They were prisoners, women and children. You butchered them after they surrendered. I told the truth about what you did. You told lies that ruined me. I told exactly what I witnessed. The court-martial believed it because it was true. Drummond's horse shifted beneath him, sensing his rider's rising rage. And now here you are, protecting them. Gone native, have you? Turned traitor to your own race for some Apache horror? Behind me, Kaya spoke. Her voice rang clear and strong off the stone walls, not a tremor in it. I am not afraid of you anymore, Snake. You beat me, you starved me, you told me how you would murder my son while I watched. But I am still here, still standing, and you will never take me again. Drummond's lip curled into something ugly. We'll see about that. After I'm finished with Harrow, I'll teach you proper respect. Then I'll use that map to find your people and burn them out of that canyon like rats from a barn. I raised the Winchester to my shoulder. Last chance, Drummond. Ride away and live. Stay and die. He laughed, actually laughed. 5 guns against 2, and one of you is a woman. I like those odds just fine. His hand dropped toward his holster. The world exploded into thunder and blood. My first shot punched the rider on Drummond's left clean out of his saddle, the heavy .4440 slug catching him square in the chest. He hit the snow and did not move. Kaya fired from behind a granite outcrop, her bullet striking the man on the far right in the shoulder. He screamed and dropped his pistol, clutching the wound. The Sharp's rifle boomed. The big .45-70 round caught me high in the left shoulder, spinning me half around in the saddle. The impact felt like being kicked by a mule. I went down hard, landing in snow that immediately began turning red. Pain. Sweet Jesus, the pain. But I had taken bullets before. You learn to function through it or you die. There is no third option. I rolled onto my good side, brought the Winchester up one-handed, and shot the man trying to flank Kaya's position. He folded over his saddle horn and slid sideways to the ground. Kaya did not hesitate, did not freeze, did not waste a single precious second on fear. She sprinted through the snow to where I had fallen, yanked my Colt's single-action army from its holster, and cocked the hammer with her thumb as she spun toward the remaining threats. 2 shots. The Sharp's man crumpled with a hole beneath his left eye. Drummond was charging straight at her, his own pistol raised, murder twisting his features into something barely human. She fired again. The bullet took him center chest, but he kept coming, rage and hatred keeping him upright through sheer demonic will. Her second shot caught him in the throat. Blood sprayed in a crimson arc across the pristine snow as he pitched sideways from his saddle. He hit the ground hard, tried to rise on trembling arms, collapsed. His eyes found mine across 10 feet of bloody snow. This isn't... He coughed a gout of dark blood. This isn't finished, Harrow. Then the light behind his eyes went dark, and Cyrus Drummond was finally still. The last rider, the one Kaya had wounded in the shoulder, wheeled his horse and fled down the trail. Neither of us had the strength or ammunition to chase him. She dropped to her knees beside me, her hands pressing hard against my shoulder wound, trying to stem the blood flow. "Stay with me," she ordered, her voice cracking despite her best efforts. "You do not die here. You hear me, Caleb Harrow? You do not die." "Just a scratch," I managed through gritted teeth. "Seen worse." "You are a terrible liar." Despite everything, I almost laughed. Hoofbeats echoed from the east, coming fast. Kaya grabbed the blood-slicked Colt and raised it toward the sound, her face grim as death itself. If more of Drummond's men had followed, we were finished. Out of ammunition, out of strength, out of miracles. But the riders who emerged from the timber wore cavalry blue, 4 of them, led by a grizzled sergeant with a gray beard and eyes that had witnessed too much killing. I knew that weathered face, had served beside it for a decade. Dutch Kowalski, my oldest friend in the world. He swung down from his horse and took in the carnage. Dead men scattered across the snow. Me bleeding out while an Apache woman tried to hold my life inside my body. Jesus Christ, Caleb. He knelt beside me, already pulling bandages from his saddlebag. You always did have a natural gift for finding the worst possible trouble. Dutch? I could barely force words through the pain. How did you? He did not answer immediately. His thick fingers packed my wound with cloth, bound it tight with practiced efficiency. The man had doctored 100 bullet holes in his army years. Then he looked at me with something strange moving behind his pale eyes. Mary, he said quietly. A week before the fever took her, she wrote me a letter. She knew she was dying, Caleb. Knew it before the doctor admitted the truth. But she wasn't worried about herself. I closed my eyes, felt something crack open in my chest that had stayed sealed shut for 3 years. She was worried about you, Dutch continued, about what you might become without her, there to keep you human. She asked me to watch over you, to make sure you didn't do anything foolish, to step in if you ever needed help you were too proud to ask for. My wife, my Mary. Even facing death, she had thought of me first. I've been keeping my distance these 3 years, Dutch said, letting you grieve in your own way. But when I heard Drummond was hunting someone in these mountains, knew it had to involve you somehow. That man never forgot a grudge in his life. You kept your promise to her. I keep all my promises. Mary knew that about me. He tied off the bandage and sat back on his heels. She loved you something fierce, Caleb. Don't ever doubt that. I could not speak, could barely breathe around the weight pressing on my heart. Dutch and his men escorted us the remaining distance to the Mescalero camp. The canyon was well hidden, protected by sheer walls and a narrow entrance easily defended. Inside, perhaps 30 people sheltered in brush wickiups. Old men with ancient eyes, women clutching children, young ones too small to understand why they had to hide. The warriors were with Victorio somewhere in the southern ranges, fighting a war they could not win. What remained here were the vulnerable ones, the ones Drummond had planned to slaughter. A small boy broke from the group as we approached, running with the desperate speed of a child who had stopped believing in miracles. Shima! The cry echoed off the canyon walls. Mother, he was calling for his mother. Kaya slid from her horse and ran. She caught Tarak in her arms and held him so tight I thought her heart might burst. Both of them were crying now, speaking rapid Apache that needed no translation. A mother reunited with her son. I watched from my saddle, one arm bound in a bloody sling, my heart cracking clean down the middle. An elderly man approached on silent feet. Silver hair hung past his shoulders. His face was carved deep by decades of sun and sorrow. He studied me with eyes that had witnessed the world change in terrible ways. You brought her back to us, he said in careful English. She was never mine to keep. You could have kept her. White men take what they want. It has always been so. Not this white man, not anymore. The old warrior considered that for a long moment, then nodded slowly, something like respect softening his weathered features. You love her. Yes. But you understand she must stay, for the boy, for our people who need her. I understand. He placed a gnarled hand on my uninjured shoulder. You are an honorable enemy, Caleb Harrow. Our people will carry your name in memory. When we speak of the whites who showed mercy, we will speak of you. Kaya came to me as I prepared to leave. Tarek clung to her hip, his small face buried against her shoulder. He was thin for 4 years old, with his mother's dark eyes and his father's stubborn chin. This is my friend, Kia told him in English, wanting me to hear. He brought me back to you when bad men tried to keep us apart. The boy peeked at me, curious but shy. I dismounted carefully, trying not to jar my wounded shoulder, and knelt so our eyes were level. Your mother is the bravest person I've ever known, I said. You take care of her now. That's your job. Can you do that? He nodded solemnly and hid his face again. Kaya and I stood facing each other in the cold mountain air. So much to say, no words that could make any of it easier. She reached out and placed her palm flat against my chest, right over my heart. I felt my pulse beating against her hand. Shikis, she said softly. Friend, then even softer. Shida, more than friend. Her eyes held mine, dark as midnight, deep as grief, warm as hearth fire. I wanted to kiss her, wanted to beg her not to go, wanted to be selfish for once in my miserable existence. Instead, I covered her hand with my own. Be safe, keep that boy close. Teach him to be brave like his mother. Be well. Let your wounds heal. Do not forget me. Never. Not if I live 100 years. She turned and walked into the camp, her son in her arms. She did not look back. June 1879. The cabin was new built, fresh pine logs notched tight against the mountain winters. I had constructed it myself over the spring months, working through the pain of my healing shoulder. Same location as before, better craftsmanship. A man learns from his mistakes if he's smart. I was mending fence in the afternoon sun when I heard hoofbeats on the trail. My hand dropped to the colt on my hip before conscious thought could intervene. Old habits die harder than old enemies, but the rider approaching on that painted mare was no threat. Apache dress, long black hair streaming in the summer wind, a face I had seen every night in my dreams for half a year. Kaya, alone. I stood frozen beside my half-finished fence, hammer forgotten in my grip, afraid to blink in case she vanished like morning fog. She dismounted with that same easy grace I remembered, walked toward me with purpose in every step, stopped 3 feet away, close enough to touch. Tarak is safe, she said. My people crossed into Mexico, where the blue-coat soldiers cannot follow. My son rides with his uncle now. They will raise him as a warrior of our band. And you? Her hand rose to her chest, pressing against her heart. My heart was not there. She held my gaze without wavering. My heart was here, in these mountains, with the man who saved my life and asked nothing in return. I let the hammer fall to the dirt, crossed the distance between us in 2 strides, pulled her into my arms and kissed her like a man who had been drowning for 3 years and finally found air. I waited every day, I said against her mouth. Every single day. I know, I felt you waiting. It called me back. This won't be easy. Your people. My people. The world out there won't understand. The world out there does not live in these mountains. Up here, there is only us. We stood there in the summer sun, 2 people who had found each other in the darkest winter. 2 wounded souls who had chosen to heal together rather than suffer apart. The West was never gentle. It took everything you loved and demanded you choose. Break down or stand back up. I chose to stand. And that blood trail through December snow led me to the only thing worth finding in this brutal country. Someone who saw all my scars and stayed anyway. We built a life together in those mountains, Kaya and I. We raised horses and grew what the high country allowed. We watched the seasons turn and the years pass. When Tarak was old enough, he came to visit, and I taught him to shoot and track while his mother taught him the old songs. We chose each other against history, against hatred, against a world that would never fully accept what we had become. But that world stayed down in the valleys where we did not live. Up here, there was only sky and stone, only survival and silence, only love. That is my story, partner. If it moved you, hit that like button. Subscribe for more tales from the frontier. Drop a comment and tell me where you are listening from. Next time, I will tell you about the winter of 1880, when Kaya's past came calling again, and I had to choose between the woman I loved and everything I once swore to protect. Until then, ride safe.
This story leaves a very clear lesson. People are not forever defined by their past, but by the choices they make in the most difficult moments. The male protagonist, a former soldier, carried within him the coldness of war and the pain of losing his wife and children. So he chose to live in solitude to avoid further hurt. But when he saw the woman being chased in the snow, he understood that silence was also a form of complicity, and compassion was sometimes the final battle to preserve his humanity. The female protagonist also teaches us that strength lies not only in weapons, but in the will to survive, the resilience to rise after torture, and the love for her child. They come from opposite sides but share the same wounds, so they understand each other through respect, not empty promises. The greatest lesson is, when the world is full of hatred, true courage is not about killing more, but about daring to defend what is right, daring to change, and daring to love again, even after having lost everything.